Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Cheryl Holder. I'm the Executive Director of the Florida Clinicians for Climate Action. And thank you for coming to our webinar on Volo Foundation Climate Week, an important week in our calendar as we know what has been happening with our weather extreme events, and all are impacted, but some more than ever. And there is a significant connection between climate change, especially with the extreme heat, the intensification of our tropical storms and floods. This in particular, based on many of our studies, we have seen maternal health be particularly affected by this. There are many studies. 2020 noted researcher Bekar showed that with pregnancy and exposure to extreme weathers, especially heat, it can have a inflammatory type response because of the stress on the mother. Dehydration can lead to decrease in placental blood flow. Also, when one gets hot, the blood leaves the placenta and goes to the skin to cool the body. Also, the emotional distress and disruption in lactation. There are many, many more things that we're beginning to see with pregnancy loss, preterm birth being lower, low birth weight, early delivery, blood pressures going up, miscarriages, lots of complications. And with that, we have found ways that we hope, we're looking for ways that we hope will be able to stop the loss that we're seeing in pregnancy. And this webinar is about one of these solutions. And just imagine being pregnant and having to deal with temperatures of hundreds and feel like temperatures over 100, storms, flood, even just preparing for storms. So today we have three panelists who have gone through many of the research and understanding and studies and experiences to help us find solutions that will protect our pregnant people and prepare them for what we are seeing in our current climate. I'll start off with Esther Rose Lewis. Then we'll have an introduction with Nkosi Muse and then Elizabeth Veras. After the introductions, we'll get right into it and start discussing the problem and hearing about one of the solutions that has been developed by FCCA and our panelists. And then we'll have more understanding of what's happening and hopefully get questions from the audience. So let's start with Esther Rose Lewis.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I am Esther, and I am also a Miami native, University of Miami graduate, and a mom of four boys, whom I birthed with midwives locally here in South Florida with the support of a doula. But after I had baby number three, I had a very emotional postpartum visit with my midwife, and that visit helped me to understand that I have a passion to help other moms go through their birthing experiences so they have a positive one. And that's how I learned about doula care and became a doula back in 2015.
Elizabeth Veras?
Hi, everybody. I'm Elizabeth. I am a doula here in South Florida, and I'm also I'm kind of the bridge between Esther's agency at Metro Mommy and with Dr. Holder at Florida Clinicians for Climate Action. And as a doula, my job is basically to be an educator and an advocate for pregnant moms in the home, in a safe space, providing the information that they may not always get from their doctors, from their visits, and really just building resilience against the effects of climate change. And I really take this work seriously because as a former teacher and as still a current teacher, this information, sometimes coming from your healthcare provider, doesn't have the same effect as someone who I'm also a mom. I've been pregnant, and so I understand on a different level, on a deeper level, the importance of educating about climate change because we seem to think it's something outside of us, and it isn't. And that's my role here.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And that takes us to Nkosi, who will give us an understanding, tell us about you, and then just go on into how this weather and climate, what does it all mean, especially for this summer? What's been happening?
Sure. Good evening, all. Happy Friday, Junior. I'm Nkosi. I am a former, well, I guess now, a researcher at Harvard. I finished my PhD at the University of Miami earlier this year in environmental science and policy. But my background is in meteorology. I have an undergrad degree in meteorology, so my training is in the hard science, the physics, things of that sort. And I've always had a passion for these kinds of things. And living in Miami, you are prone to experience all of the different climate hazards at their worst, and sometimes at their best, right? So I'm going to share some slides. All right. So what we're looking at right here is essentially every hurricane or cyclone that has developed in the Atlantic throughout 2025, this current season, right? And as you look at it, you see that there really aren't that many that have come close to touching the United States. And contrary to the predictions that we've heard at the beginning of the year, where we were assumed, or scientists have said in their predictions from the models that we'd be experiencing 20 to 25 different tropical cyclones, it's not that we haven't had the conditions that have been suitable to develop these storms, because as you can see here, tropical cyclones 1 through essentially 9, all 9 that we've had, or excuse me, 1 through 10, have all intensified into pretty significant storms. More recently, Imelda and Humberto also intensified to major hurricanes or storms that are stronger than Category 3, right? But the same phenomenon we've been seeing, except for Tropical Cyclone 3, which made landfall as a tropical storm, have all been getting pushed back out to the east. Now, mind you, we've been on the nice side of things. Let me see if I can get my slides to work on me there. Yes, because in the Pacific, there have been 17 named storms that have passed through in that region. So it's been very, very active over there. And then even in the Western Pacific, now we're talking about Asia, Japan. We've had this is Typhoon Ragnan, who was actually the strongest storm we've seen in years, right? It was a super typhoon that also caused $207 billion in damage out in Asia. So we've been very blessed on this side of the Atlantic, but now it's time to get into why. Why have all of these different storms have been going back out into the Atlantic rather than coming straight into the US? Well, firstly, we have had some Saharan dust. So every year there is a period of time where the Sahara Desert on the western coast of Africa does kick up dust, and that can get carried through by trade winds all the way across the Atlantic. And when that happens, it can inhibit tropical cyclone development. So earlier in the year, earlier in our tropical cyclone season, which extends from May to early November, we did have a low period in that tropical cyclone development. More recently, what we've been looking at is something called the Bermuda High, or essentially an anticyclone or a high pressure center that essentially drags all of our storms from Africa west into the United States. It's been weaker. Not only has it been weaker, but it's also been pushed to the east a bit. And that's likely due to the fact that I won't get too much into the semantics of why, but usually because the ocean is warmer closer to Europe. And when this happens, the high pressure system shifts a little bit to the east. And as that does that, it doesn't have the bandwidth to cross all the way over to the United States. So if we're talking, I don't know if you can see my mouse here, but this high pressure system here, because it's so far east, the storms are getting caught on it and dragged up through Bermuda, as opposed to a higher or larger high pressure system dragging these storms all the way to the west. And as a result, we've seen fewer storms. Another thing that could also play into it is a low pressure system that actually blocks storms from coming over the US. So this is a low pressure system that actually we saw recently with Imelda that stopped it from going all the way to the west of the United States. And then on top of that, Humberto and Imelda in this kind of simulation that you see here actually kind of dance with one another in what's called the Fujiwara effect. So when this happens, another storm can actually pull another storm away from the coast. And that's exactly what we saw with Humberto that was making its way past Imelda or ahead of Imelda near Bermuda. It actually kind of pulled Imelda away from the coast. And as a result, we didn't have any type of landfall. So this pattern is expected to persist because hurricane season ends within the next couple of weeks or so. But I'll stop here for now, just to give you the briefing on why hurricane season has looked the way that it has.
Well, that's very interesting. And we see why when we go into the communities and we ask like, everybody about this weather and climate, and they were like, what do I do? But we know the health impacts. And how do we translate all this information into a way that patients will be able to act appropriately? And seeing the complexity, whether it's Fujiwara, Imelda, or high pressure, low pressure, how do we translate that all to patients? So I take that over to Esther, who will tell us about our doula CHOT program and how we can perhaps bridge that gap between the meteorologic science, the medical science, and getting better health outcomes. Esther?
Yeah, so definitely. I will say, as a Miami native, I've had a chance to live through multiple hurricanes here. And so it is a surprise that they have not made landfall, but we have absolutely experienced a lot of rain and flooding. And I just recall a situation when I supported a family through Hurricane Irma. And I was already a doula at the time. A doula is someone who provides professional, emotional, physical, as well as informational support. But we never really had that hat to wear in our training in terms of supporting someone navigating, evacuating the state, which many of us had to do here for Hurricane Irma. And so we had to travel across state lines, and I had to offer support while she was increasing in her anxiety and her stress about getting her entire family, other younger children, and her husband husband out of the state. And at the time, searching, working with her midwife who met her also in Georgia, we realized there's no tools really for clients to understand their risk. But more importantly, we know that doulas can provide a safe space to provide education. And so we do this continuously through childbirth education. And so I saw it as an easy fit back in 2022 to kind of work together with some folks at Human Rights Watch, as well as our researcher, Zainab Jah, to create what would be our initial doula training, right? What kind of workshop could we come up with to just start to expose the doulas to this type of information? And what we learned was we really wanted to base our work and our tool for the doulas, the tool that we were able to create with the support of the CDC Foundation. We wanted to make a tool that was rounded in evidence-based types of questions that may already be asked. And so we leveraged different tools from the CDC, FEMA, as well as the PRAMs to kind of take a look and provide a profile. And so we look at three different categories. We're looking at the climate, right? What is this client's exposure or risk level when it comes to extreme heat? And how resilient will they be if they were to not have working AC, right? And here in Miami, we have a lot of homes that are older. They don't have a lot of working AC. And so in a case like that, that client would score particularly low in terms of being resilient. We also have another category of community. Where does this client live, right? As you noticed, because we're on the East Coast, we have not had that transition of feeling the waves of these storms as much as we could. And it's because of our geographic location. And so within our state, we have a particular high flood insurance costs, right? Because we have certain areas that flood more than others. And so we're assessing and finding out where our clients live. And then thirdly, we're looking at, do they have a disaster plan in place, right? If they had to evacuate and they're 8 months, 9 months into their pregnancy, do they know where to go? Do they know where to stay cool in cases of extreme heat? And so those are some of the things that we were looking into and got more clarity on and developed a tool to help our doulas assess our clients' resiliency.
Thank you. And Esther mentioned the CDC Foundation, which is the perfect segue, because when Esther brought this idea, because Florida Clinicians recognizes the heat, we've had lectures on the impact of extreme weather and heat on pregnancies, and working together with Metro Mommy and the group in our community, we developed this program, taking the ideas, which are the best tools, chilled out questionnaires, looking at the PRAMs, which talks about pregnancy. Look at disaster prep. We said, how do we pull these all together and use the science to come up with a way that we could give this to doulas, they use it, and then decide where the person risk score would be. We also put them in the flood map. And we said, this will be the best way to let them find out, are they in a flood zone? And then we worked on doing that. And this is funded through the CD Foundation to be able to pull these resources and develop a curriculum to be able to train doulas to do just what Esther have been working on. And then we took that action. And as we trained them, we then say, now let's go out and try and use these questionnaires. Let's see what flood mapping, let's see what resources we can leverage. So if they need an air conditioner, let's give them an air conditioner. If they need the hurricane supplies, let's do a nice hurricane kit with a flashlight and a radio and maps and much more information and first aid kit, lots of things. Let's see how we can find these resources, pull it together and help our community. We did it in a small project, and that's what the CDC Foundation funded. And we identify doulas through Esther's work with Metro Mom Chat, and I see the Jasmine Project. We are able to find doulas who would say, I want to volunteer to learn how to do this. Let's try it with our clients and let's see what happens. And one of such doulas is Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, if you could tell us, I see Shantae is on, and she's another one of our doula who also did this project. So let's hear, Elizabeth, what was your experience in taking what's a conceptual idea, having the science behind it, and then put it in action and applying this?
So my experience with the entire training from beginning to end has been just really gratifying and really eye-opening. From the very beginning, we were given the vocabulary of climate change, but it was provided in like pre-chewed pieces for us. So hearing these, these terms that seem so far away, greenhouse gases, and, really connecting to the images of, oh, wow, the greenhouse effect is really just a blanket that traps heat. And that's what causes all of this like ripple effect, a domino effect, and really affects our health, right? So we know where the anxiety is when we hear that a storm is coming, right? And so we're already in a place of fear. And I love that Dr. Holder said, action. That's what we do when we ask the questions on the questionnaire, and people get to see where they are. These families understand, oh, wow, I live in a flood zone. What can I do? These tools, a go bag, a plan. These are the things that really activate them to take part in their own, resilience, but also to get to a point where they can, they know who they can lean to in the community. They know they have us as doulas, but where are the places that Esther mentioned that they're going to go to? And then the piece with the Eco America training kind of just provided this foundational understanding of, what really is climate change. And so being able to, and right around the time we were taking the training, the flooding was happening in Texas. So we're understanding in real time what climate change actually means. We live in South Florida, and I do some work in assisted living facilities. And I remember a couple of years ago that one of those vulnerable communities, the seniors at that facility in Hollywood, extreme heat, they lost power. And that was tragic. Right. And so being able to really bring this information in a way that, health information's warnings, we have sirens where I live. And when a storm is coming, you hear the siren and, find a safe place because lightning strikes. And so that's what we get to do as doulas, is to provide this information and really give them tools as a warning.
Thank you. Definitely. I like what you said. Provide this information, give them tools as warnings. And we're honored to have Shantae Young, who's one of our newest doula educator. And Shantae, we just wanted to hear a little bit about your experience as you've learned about the health harms of heat and extreme weather and going through the course. What is your experience with it? What are your sort of challenges, take-home messages that you've had?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Shantae Young, and so just to piggyback what Elizabeth said, it really was a great experience in learning the information, also being able to process it enough to break it down for the clients. And my experience working with them directly also was really rewarding, because a lot of them didn't know that they either lived in the flood zone, didn't know what a cooling center was. So being able to just like educate them. The most rewarding part of it was the portion of helping them to create a prepared a disaster plan. Because a lot of them didn't know, they would just think, oh, whatever's on the news or whatever we hear about, we just follow that. But knowing what to do, being prepared, having food enough for each household member up to 3 days, for a mom who's actually breastfeeding, how she could store her milk or keep it cold or frozen, having a manual breast pump. If you have currently, they're using the electric pump, of course, because we have electricity, but the different tools that they could have to use in the event of an emergency. It was helpful for them to know, like having extra cash stash. You're like, oh, well, everybody use tap nowadays. No, you have to have cash. Whether you keep it in your car, having food in your car. Like some of the moms I was able to help create like a backpack. So one of the moms was telling me she went to a school fair, a back to school fair, and she got all these backpacks. I'm like, okay, so we're gonna create a backpack for each kid. So we're able to put in clothes for each kid, snacks for each kid, different things that they would need in the event they did have to get up and go. They have what they need. Each kid knows, hey, grab my backpack. Mom gonna get the baby, and you grab your backpack, and we go. Helping them get copies of their personal documents, social security cards, birth certificates, to make sure it's stored in something plastic that if it did have to get wet for flooding or rain or anything like that, they have it. Have the original put up, a copy to take with them in the event they need that. So all those different things, it was really good, and it was not necessarily shocking to see how many really don't prepare or don't even know to be prepared. Like some of the moms who were first-time moms and young moms, teens still in high school. I'm like, yes, you have your parent, but you still have to be responsible for yourself. So you make sure that you have what you need for yourself and your baby. So it was really a great experience. And so they definitely was very appreciative of the kit that they got, able to go through it and identify how to use some of the items, the cooling towels, the mask that was in there, the flashlight. So all of that is good. It was a really good thing for everybody. So it was a good experience for me.
Thank you, Shantae.
You're
Well,
welcome.
heard great experiences. Now, Esther, and we had another participant, another nurse who helped put this material together. So, as you were teaching this and gathering the information, tell us more that somebody out there would know what we were doing to be able to achieve the instruction for the doulas. And you did a lot of this background work, Esther.
I previously had an opportunity to work in an advisory role to support the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health develop a toolkit. And I noticed from then that a lot of the times the advice or support that's given to clinicians does not always come with that lens of pregnant people, right? And what is really possible for a pregnant person, a postpartum person, a person who's breastfeeding. I'm also a board member for Breastfeed Miami. And so I had an opportunity to not only get a chance to change how it is we're sharing the information with the community by not just written materials that we had available. We created a manual, of course, but also did some promotion internally on email to promote our program. We also had opportunities to be in the community doing outreach. And so having those conversations one-on-one, a lot of that helped me to understand that, one, it does require time, right? This is not going to be a 3-minute conversation, a 5-minute conversation. There has to be this openness to listen, to learn about what other flags might be coming up. And so what I've learned so far in terms of just our preliminary data and things that we've seen about the experiences folks have had is there's a lot of financial stress in our community right now. We're serving a high need population. At least 65% or more of our MOMCHA program clients are coming to us on Medicaid or uninsured. The MOMCHA program is making optimal maternal child health accessible, and it is the kind of like our conduit, our referral program or system that we're using to help connect the clients to doulas. And so some of them experience some unexpected expenses, right? Loss of life in their families. And so that becomes very hard for someone to create another pool of funds, right, to support a disaster plan and the items that they'll need, right? We also saw a lot of emotional toll on some families too, challenges with transportation. Some of them were actively pursuing their own education, as well as making sure their kids, their younger siblings, during their pregnancy are getting to where they need to be. And one of the things that I want to just highlight is that as a result of a client coming into our program through the DC program and getting that assessment done, the client was actually able to continue care with that doula, who's also a MOMCHA program doula as well. And so she's going to continue serving that client during the remainder of her postpartum period and receive additional visits at no cost to that client. And so we love the idea that, you know, our community doulas can have their own clients, but also refer them into this program so that they all can benefit from getting an assessment done at some point during their pregnancy or shortly after in their postpartum period. In addition to Dr. Holder, I'm sure she leveraged her network and got some other OBs involved. And so far in our MOMCHA program, about 23% or so of our referrals come in from OBGYNs or providers or clinics. And so we know further outreach is really important to make sure, one, they do understand what doulas do, and that they also know that they can streamline and send their clients in for these referrals to get this program in as well.
Thank you. Esther did a lot of work, and what FCCA does is sort of look at the materials because we'll bring the scientists and the physicians in to review the materials that will be appropriate for the community that doulas can distribute because doulas do not make decisions on treatment and we're not intervening with the OB treatment, but we take established information from CDC, from AmeriCares, from appropriate sources, and then tailor them to our community. Our community tend to be low wealth. They come from high heat vulnerable communities based on the zip code and what's been matched in our database. And so we know some of their specific needs. And that's where the doula, who is on the ground, able to make the visits at the homes, can bring that information in a manageable way where they can act and fully understand, like you heard Shantae just talked about how they didn't even know about that they lived in a flood zone and how important that knowledge is to be able to act. So with these tools, I know Shantae, you've used the climate risk assessment tool that we created, and Elizabeth, you've looked at this tool. How is it using this tool with the clients? Either Elizabeth or Shantae.
I'll just say that, we don't know what we don't know, right? So when we ask these questions, even for myself, it was like, wait a minute, I don't have a go bag, right? I don't have my documents in plastic and ready to go. So it just opened up the awareness, right? And it's the same thing, just like our jobs as doulas are to give, the tools so that they find a place of calm and peace, and the questions on the tool provide that common piece, because at least they get started on, oh, I need to gather this, I need to prep this, I should have this ready, but without the list you just don't know. So I feel like the tool is really, and then the thing is, we're not just educating the moms, because the moms, there's a saying that in certain societies, if you educate the men, you don't really, the knowledge doesn't go very far, right? But if we're educating the pregnant moms, they're going to educate their kids, they're going to educate their moms, their aunts, their neighbors. And so, the entire community becomes resilient.
Thank you. Shantae, anything to add?
Yes, I'm glad she brought that point up about the family members, because some of them do live with other family members, seniors, like their grandmothers or moms or whomever. And so I did have a few families that had the male partner there, and they was like, well, hey, why y'all not giving us the education? I'm like, well, you more than welcome to sit and be present and get the information, because it's important. We want everybody to have it. And the tool, like she said, it really is an eye-opener for everybody, not just for us educating them, but us as well, for us to be on our P's and Q's as an educator, to make sure that we are educated and have the information, as well as our family members. And like she said, keeping the community, abreast of what's going on and how to react in it, and just being proactive. That's the most important thing, knowing what to do prior to. So if and when that situation's happening, you're ready to go.
Yeah, in particular about heat. When I read the information about heat and the stillbirths, I was a little bit surprised. When your pregnant person hears about this, what has been the reactions?
For me, their reactions have been like they're not surprised, because sometimes they're just like, I guess when they're like further along in pregnancy, they're like overly stimulated and hot anyway, just kind of irritable, just going literally from one area to another, even just going in and out the house. Like some of the parents, they're saying like, oh, I walk my kid to school in the morning. It's the heat is so stifling, just like hot. They're like, I'm trying to walk with my Stanley, hold my kid's hand across the street. So like the heat is unbearable. And so a lot of times, like the ones who are home and in preparation for maternity, they're like, they really don't go out. They try not to go out as much as possible and stay in. So they were not surprised just in regular heat, but the added component of being pregnant and heavier and having to wear less clothing or lighter clothing, it is a serious thing for them. And a lot of them did take it serious and were aware. They just wasn't aware of why it's the extra heat. So for sure.
So they knew, and which is
Yeah.
what we know. Patients are really always very smart. And on top of things, they may not have the science and the vocabulary to explain it, but they knew what was happening to their bodies. And I hope they felt more reassured that they're on the right track. And then we could give them even better guidance. Yes, you're right. Stay in and don't wait till you're thirsty. Drink that extra fluids. Go to the cooling center. I know somebody, I don't remember which of the doulas told me the stories about somebody who was unhoused and how she dealt with the heat in her pregnancy. So I know what we're doing as doulas, what you guys are doing is just remarkable and so needed. I know in Kosi, you're doing some incredible science and research because you hear where our community lives. They live in areas with a lot of concrete, 5 to 10 degrees hotter than what we see on the thermostat, on the weather report. And and these folks are pregnant. So what is your science and your research? Maybe that could help guide us.
Yeah, so even though we don't have, super typhoon regatas that, are hundreds of millions of dollars in damage right now, we're still dealing with the heat threat that is consistent, not just throughout the daytime, but I think a lot of people don't realize that heat is also really consistent at nighttime, especially in South Florida. And I'll share hopefully this isn't too technical, but I'll share another chart real quick from a study that we did that actually shows what temperature looks like across the coast at nighttime. So what you're looking at on the left is land surface temperature. That's a map of southern Florida. And then if we look at those colors from yellow to red, the redder it is, the hotter it is on the ground there. Overlaid on top of those are dots, and those signify how many hours at that specific station or at that specific location that the temperature stays above 90 degrees Fahrenheit at nighttime. So the darker the blue circle, essentially the more time overnight, the temperature is at 90 degrees plus Fahrenheit, right? And that's warm. That's really, really warm at nighttime, right? And some people can't afford to run their AC all night, right? So they're dealing with the elements overnight of just complete heat in their homes, which also bake even further sometimes because there is no ventilation going throughout their homes, right? So what we're looking at is a significant heat threat, like I said, not during the day, but also at nighttime, and that's why we're calling this chronic humid heat. And if we really think about it, and I'm glad that it was alluded to before, when we think about why in humid environments it's so much warmer at nighttime than it is in like, a dry climate per se, right? This is essentially that greenhouse effect that Elizabeth, you were talking about before, happening on a local scale. So we have at nighttime that red to yellow colors I was showing you before. That's how much radiation the surface has absorbed throughout the course of the day from the sun. In urban areas, absorb even more of this. Why? Because they have surfaces that just really just love eating up radiation, right? That black pavement. Think about walking over black pavement on a really hot day as opposed to walking over grass, right? You're probably not going to be barefoot on the black pavement, right? So at nighttime, all this radiation that was absorbed has to be re-emitted back into space. But when there's a lot of humidity, a lot of air moisture, a lot of water vapor in the air, including clouds, that that radiation isn't going anywhere. It's being absorbed by the cloud and sent right back down to the surface, right? So you're dealing with the surface greenhouse effect, not to mention the larger scale greenhouse effect that's going on also, right? So these different things in combination, all happening together, are really, really amplifying this heat effect that we're seeing. And I really feel like just to touch on this too, Dr. Holder, the relationship that we have to have, with doulas and with other folks who are in the community, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? I think there are some meteorologists and then researchers, who are one and the same, like myself. Our role is the same, right? To communicate and deliver this information to folks who can who can give it to the community, right? Because a lot of times folks don't trust scientists too. There's a lot of misinformation and things like that that go around, right? But if we can talk to trusted sources in the community, and that's exactly what I tried to do when I was in Miami, so they can pass that information along to their community because they're trusted in their community. We can have better, a better pass of information, a better pass of knowledge down the downstream, so people are more prepared.
Thank you. Elizabeth, Shantae, what do you think, Esther? Because these are the information that we now have to translate into the community. Just hearing something more about the nighttime temperatures. How do
Absolutely.
would you do that?
Absolutely. One of the roles that we have is to encourage our clients to exercise, to move their bodies, to prepare their bodies for labor. And when we have a client living in these hot areas saying, it's too hot in the morning to go out, they're anticipating that at least it'll cool down enough for them to walk in the evening. But what you're sharing with us, Nkosi, kind of proves why sometimes our moms are not doing that as well. And so we really want to make sure we mitigate the risk there. And I know that as a doula over the last 10 years, building trust, building rapport is something that's really easy for us to do. And it is something that we can sustain because we're spending so much time with the client. You're talking about on average 40 hours, think of a 40-hour week, and we're spreading that across the birth process. We're spreading that across the pregnancy, and we are engaging with that family throughout their pregnancy and throughout the birthing process, as well as the postpartum period. So it makes total sense to me, and it's why I'm actively pursuing it. That's why I'm so glad to just have been able to work with Dr. Nikisha Smith to help develop the curriculum for our doulas. She's also a doula herself, served as a postpartum nurse as well. And so she brought in everything that we really needed our doulas to know at the core to help translate that very, succinctly for those doulas.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, I see some audience, some other nurses and folks that I've recognized who's worked in the community. I don't know if you have any questions or any comments before we go back and hear some more about the program to get you involved, because we want this to be a little bit more interactive with our audience. And Eliseo, if you could come on and just tell us a little bit about you and your experiences.
Yeah, Eliseo Santana. I'm the regional golf manager for Alianza Center, and I've been learning so much. I really never did connect pregnancy and extreme heat. I mean, I was always concerned, but it is now that I get to know 45 years ago, when my wife was pregnant with our first child here in Florida, we did not have air conditioning in our home, and the doctor gave her the said that she had toxemia. And one of the things that he suggested was that we put a small air conditioning unit in our bedroom, particularly for nighttime. And and I did that. But now it makes sense. Now I connect the dots. And that was 45 years ago that was suggested. My concern that I have is there have a lot of I come across a lot of women that are pregnant, and they may or may not have documentation, but they all have no trust, and they're not going to go seek any kind of help from anyone, and many of them are in places that lack air conditioning. Also, or if they have air conditioning, they have to turn it off because they cannot afford it. And my concern is that if we have a hurricane like what we had last year, we had the two hurricanes and power was off for several weeks. I hope that we don't get one, but if it happens, um, these women will not go to a cooling center. So I'm thinking my technology wise, maybe we need of getting a generator, a solar generator that is charged by solar panel large enough to be able to run a mini refrigerator to keep the breast milk going, or to keep the things there, to run large fans. Obviously, you have to have some kind of air movement. You cannot close all the house up and expect to be, but you have some kind of movement, and maybe even power up some of their medical equipment that they have. They normally cannot afford it. So I'm just thinking out loud that maybe as a prescription, when we have a pregnant woman or a woman that just gave birth that is in this predicament just before the hurricane happens, that we may give them the supply of a solar generator with solar panel. We're talking about $400 to $500 that's large enough to do all these things. I don't have the resources for that. I'm just throwing that out there as a food for thought. So that's where I'm at.
No, thank you for your feedback. And with your wife, 45 years ago, the doctor knew. So what we're doing now, because it's even hotter, is incorporating that into the basic care and not waiting. But your recommendation is going to be, where's the money coming from? And with the undocumented, it's very challenging. I see, Esther, you have some things and experiences that you put it in the
Well,
chat.
well, thankfully, we did have the CDC Foundation host us and help us learn and best practices from across the nation. And I just remember this project, right, that was shared with us during one of our first convenings. And they do something similar. They leverage the local church as like the hub of the energy once the power goes out somewhere after a hurricane or some kind of storm. And I just thought about your goal. It's a great big goal, costs lots of money, but definitely something that is kind of happening already. And we just need to figure out a way to, one, for me, it's all about supply and demand, right? If we can increase the demand from us as providers, from our clients as consumers, right, here in this state, and make some changes in terms of policy and advocating for this, I think that that's really where it's going to start, So thank you for that comment.
Yeah, for undocumented in this climate, it's very difficult. It's going to have to come from churches and other private funds. Some states have tried Medicaid set aside type programs where they're able to pay for equipment, right down to asthma. They can pay for certain things that will help the client. And I think that was done in North Carolina and some other states, not in Florida. We're still struggling to get Florida to actually allocate funds to pay doulas to do this kind of work. It's approved, but the dollars aren't flowing. So I think this is going to be for a philanthropic organization or a Give Miami Day or some community coming together as a community to get dollars to do sort of protection. In the meantime, nonprofit organizations, free clinics, I think these are avenues that we're looking at that could connect with folks who are in that undocumented position and need the care. So that may be the way. Constance Brown, if you could come on and tell us a little bit about you and your experience and your question.
Um, Probably a comment and a question. Hi, everyone. My name's Constance Brown, and I live in the Central Florida region. And I just started working with Dr. Holder and FCCA, and I will be working with churches. I am a pastor's wife or first lady, however you want to call me, and I'm a registered nurse of almost 50 years. But maternal health is not my, as they say, sweet spot. But this has been very interesting listening to it because it's got bells going off, Dr. Holder, because I do have a church in a rural area in Lake County. So I go to church an hour away. I would be interested in seeing that map for the Central Florida area that showed the heat that you have in South Florida, because when those hurricanes come, they hit the Central Florida area just as much as it does South Florida, believe it or not. When it comes up, I live about 20 minutes from Disney, and all these storms come up this way. But I'd be interested in seeing the map with the Central Florida area, which is where I work, like 6 counties around. And also, I'm going to look this up. The information you gave on the model. I'd be interested in what the church is doing, like you said, with the model and the hub, because I am working with a young lady who does maternal health, and she's wanting to move it into Lake County. So I just wanted to make a comment. All this sounds good, and I'm connecting dots. And believe it or not, I had toxemia too. I had a horrible pregnancy, and one and done. So it is challenging, because I did run 5 free and charitable clinics during COVID up here called Shepherd's Hope, and dealing with the undocumented is challenging because we provide care without asking for any information. But when we needed to get them to another level of care, we could not. And now that there is no really free place or a safe space, even our churches are not safe anymore. It has been challenging, because you think about the Central Florida area, we do have a high Haitian and Hispanic population. So just making a comment, it was glad to hear this. My head's clicking, because I'm one of those that create and bring things together. I'm the grant administrator for another organization. I'm in 2 nursing organizations up here as well. So it's just been interesting hearing what you're saying and giving me some more thought and ideas in that maternal health arena. I also train community health workers. So when you're talking about the doulas, do you use any community health workers out in the communities?
For community health workers, a little different from a doula, because doula training is pretty specific. But we can train community health workers on heat and heat education and disaster prep. They would not follow the client through their pregnancy and postpartum like a doula, but they would follow for the educational work. So definitely, and connecting for services. So absolutely, both titles can do this work, just in different scope. The scopes may change, but I'm glad you're on, because we have it, Central Florida already mapped. It's done through the Eastern Resiliency, and it's also done through University of Central Florida with Dr. Emmerich. So we can get you that information. We can work together further. With the free clinics, the problems we're facing, there's also telehealth. I think what we're hearing is there are lots of ideas out here, and this is how you bring it up from the community, get these ideas, then we find some funding sources and build it out to hopefully get some better, stable funding that serves the community at the same time. It sounds great. Were there any challenges, ladies, in doing this? Because it sounds like everything went smoothly. Were there any challenges, and how did we overcome them?
Well, I know from some feedback from some doulas, debriefing, language was a little bit of a barrier. Right now, the tool is in English, but we did have clients who spoke Haitian Creole. Thankfully, we had doulas who were matched who were also very good at translation, so they were able to translate it quite well. So that'll be the next iteration, is making sure that it's in English and in Haitian. English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. The other thing that was a challenge, as is typical when you're trying to make a referral happen, is sometimes there was unresponsiveness. So the client showed interest, filled out the form, but in several attempts, we still weren't able to connect back again with that client for whatever reason. And so we continue to reach out as much as we can, but sometimes that unresponsiveness led to them not being selected to be paired with a doula to complete the assessment.
Okay. Anything, Shantae? Elizabeth, completing the training process, because we did do Eco America, which was several hours, and we did our own training and making videos and before to prove the competency of the doula educator. I don't know if there are any struggles there.
It was
Well, I didn't,
more. Oh, sorry,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, go ahead, Shante.
No, I was just gonna say I don't feel like I encountered many challenges, with the exception of like other family members that may have been present in the house. Like I said, there were a few dads or spouses that were kind of kept walking through and they would say stuff as they hear the conversation. I'm like, hey, you can come sit down. It's for the family. It's to educate everybody. But they were feeling a little excluded. So I would say that. And also the kid, it was for the family, but primarily mom, making sure, but the family to have some items. And so some of them had breast pumps in them. And they're like, oh, what you got in there for dad? I'm like, well, dad, you can hold a flashlight while mom gets other things. But, we talked about other ways that they can help, making sure they had batteries for the radio, making sure they had batteries for the flashlights, going on the list and see what they feel needed to be added to the list. And so one of the little kids had mentioned that was in the home was saying, because we were talking about the heat and how mom was so hot in the morning, it was like, oh, you should take your makeup fan. And I was like, what is the makeup fan? And he was like, oh, all the time she gets her makeup done, she always walking around with the fan saying she gotta keep herself cool so her makeup doesn't get messed up. And I'm like, right. And so I felt that was like really good that the kid connected the heat with how hot it is outside, that even if mom gets hot, she can use her handheld fan that uses batteries. She could charge it up. And so I mentioned him. I was like, do you know they have fans that you can actually put water in and it blows a little mist too? And he was like, no, I never seen one of those. So just making sure that they have all the information and just including everybody, not just the moms. We are doulas and that's our primary focus and client, but it is the family unit. So I think just some of the men felt left out, but the kids, they didn't care. They're like, oh, they just got in the conversation and joined in and actually had great information and feedback. So yeah, that was good for me.
Well, thank you. I love that makeup fan. I thought we were putting a fan in there, a portable fan, but it does. Dade County gives out the Mister ones,
Okay.
and we give out the other small one. I guess could be a makeup fan. But these are important things that by having doulas and having somebody in the home interacting with the families, and we try and encourage about warning systems, checking on each other. And I think that little one's going to check on his mom when it gets too hot. Where else can we go with this? I look at policies. As we know, policies is really one of our big things that we need to be able to expand a program like this more rapidly. What are ideas? What would you think we would need to make this work bigger across the board? Every pregnant person, not just high risk in certain communities, but every pregnant person is at risk because the whole planet is warmer. What are some policies that you thought we could use? Just because I'm getting so many ideas here. So I said, might as well throw it out.
Dr.
Eliseo?
Holder. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, Eliseo had his hand up. Then you're next, Nikosi.
I I became familiar with a project that's happening at a hospital in Boston, Massachusetts, in which the many of the physicians they encounter individuals that have issues, physical issues that come from too much heat or just that the electric bill being too high and they have to turn down their electricity, their cooling, and they're getting these issues. And the project that they did at this particular hospital is that the doctor was able to prescribe money to pay for the electric bill for that month as a prescription and they were using funds that they had in the hospital. I'm not quite sure how they got it, but it was funds that were for charity type of a thing, and they were using that as the source to pay for an individual that the doctor was able to link some kind of a health issue with the lack of electricity that led to them turning off the air
Wow.
conditioning and other things. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know all the details,
Oh,
but I
they're
love the
different.
idea.
Yeah, thank you. There's the LIHEAP funds that comes, and that's through the state and the federal government. But ideas of what's called community benefit dollars that come from hospital systems and maybe private, but definitely mutual aid funding is what Esther wrote. So absolutely, there's solutions out there. Nkosi?
I was just rewinding because I wanted to touch on Constance's point about the heat in Central Florida as well. And I had another map, being the nerd that I am, that I want to pull up and show that actually has, what that area of Florida looks like. And this is during the daytime. So if y'all can see this, you see that it gets really, really hot. You can see where the areas that pop out, that are warmer across the state of Florida, period, right? So in southeastern Florida, that's the most urbanized region. So by default, it gets the warmest on that coast. So you can see over here all the way West Palm, all the way down to Fort Lauderdale, down to Miami, Homestead, et cetera, right? But then in Central Florida, Orlando popping out right here, and you also see some of the major roads that go through as well because they're the things that are absorbing all the heat throughout the course of the day. But I would argue a lot of the time that Central Florida can be a lot warmer than South Florida. And why is that? Because Central Florida doesn't have that same sea breeze. They're kind of stuck right in the middle. So unless you're at Tampa or you're near Daytona or Port St. Lucie, things of those sort, you're probably dealing with heat that's an air mass that's not moving around as much, right? And the crazy part is, just to take it a step further, even in South Florida, we're starting to see the sea breeze weaken a bit. Why is that? Because the urban area, usually a sea breeze is generated by a difference in temperature. So the ocean's usually cooler, the land is usually hotter. There's some type of gradient going on. It blows wind from one side to the other, right? But because the ocean's getting so warm and because the land is already warm, now we're not seeing any type of gradient. There's no pressure difference. There's no wind. So sometimes the sea breeze is actually getting weaker. So we could very well have seen Miami, places that are along the coast, just as warm as Central Florida, places that don't have, water abutting near their shores. So I
Wow.
just wanted to insert that.
Thank you. Well, Constance, you got a little bit understanding what you've been feeling. It's nice to have the vocabulary and see the science to put together what we've been feeling for years, and also to realize why we have to continue doing this work and figure out how we're going to leverage dollars, leverage understanding of it, and prepare and protect our clients. We're coming down to 7:30, and it's 7:30, and I have to thank everyone for this wonderful discussion. But we've learned so much and we can continue the work. Thank you, Volo Foundation, for doing Climate Week. Thank you, CDC Foundation, Mommy Mom Chat, Jasmine Project, and Shantai, and all the clients, and FCCA, and Bridget, and everyone who's attended. Please continue to follow us at Florida Clinicians on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn, Florida Clinicians of Climate Action. And we're on Facebook, Florida Coalition for Climate Action. Much more information. You'll see information from Eliseo Alianza, from Constance Brown's United Community. And we've got a good feeling of West Coast, Central Florida, South Florida. This is what Florida Climate Week is all about. Thank you, everyone. Good night.